Hey everyone, Dr. Bodle here, and today we're going to talk about one of my favorite topics, which is fasting in the context of Hashimoto's. Now, as we always like to point out, strategies are only valuable to us if they fit the situation. So today we're going to talk about whether or not fasting is appropriate for you, and if so, the types of approaches we can utilize to maximize the benefits of fasting. So if you've been looking for some additional ways to support your thyroid and immune health, stick with me through this one. I think there's going to be a lot of information that you're really going to enjoy. And of course, before we jump into things, here's your quick reminder to like, subscribe, and click on the bell for notifications so you can stay up to date on the best natural strategies to support your Hashimoto's and hypothyroid symptoms, and so you don't miss any of the new content when it's released every single Thursday. Thanks so much. I always appreciate the support. So to me, fasting is whenever we greatly reduce or completely avoid caloric intake for at least 8 to 12 hours. And the reason for that time frame is because the research suggests that around that time, our metabolism starts to shift. We switch from the food that we're bringing in from our meals as the main source of our calories and energy, and instead start to upregulate pathways that break down stored forms of energy, primarily in the form of glycogen and fat. And although there will be differences in the physiological changes and outcomes depending on how long we fast, fasting, whether in shorter or longer durations, has been shown to have a number of benefits, including things like improving immune function, reducing inflammation, improving blood sugar regulation and blood sugar response, helping to support better gut health and microbiome activity, and improving neurological function. Not to mention the thing that most people look to fasting for, which is better metabolic control and improvements in weight loss. And in addition to those known benefits, although I don't think everything needs to be done with our evolutionary physiology in mind, fasting is one of those things that makes a lot of sense when we look at it through that lens. The world that we live in now has more food availability than ever before. And forget the fact that going to the grocery store isn't exactly hunting and gathering. We don't even need to do that anymore. We can simply stay at home and order food on our phone. And because of this, for many people, that natural rhythm of having food and then not having food for potentially extended periods of time is completely gone. And we find that in general, most people are eating much too frequently throughout the day. This is why fasting, even to a small degree, can be very therapeutic, and it helps us to restore some of that metabolic balance. However, as I said at the beginning of the video, we need to make sure that we're applying fasting when it's appropriate. And although fasting can be beneficial, it is a stress to the body. And although stress can be beneficial to the body, sometimes for people with autoimmunity and with Hashimoto's, they're already at their maximum tolerance for the amount of stress in their life. This is where my favorite bucket analogy comes into play. And as I was working on today's video, I realized that I actually have two bucket analogies. One is for the holes that you have to address in your bucket and how it relates to thyroid hormone. This is the one about too much stress in our life and overflowing the bucket, so I guess I gotta be more clear about my buckets in the future. But anywho, the bucket analogy goes like this. We all have a bucket, and that bucket is going to vary in size depending on our health history. And in that bucket is essentially all of the stressors that we have to deal with, over the past few years, but also over the past few weeks and days. Some of us have a lot of stress, some of us don't have as much. But no matter the situation, whenever we do have stress, it's going to fill that bucket up a little bit more. As long as we have space in our bucket, then we're able to tolerate an increase in stress. But if we're existing at a state where our bucket is almost always filled all the way to the top, then anything, even something small and trivial, has the potential to push us over the edge. And when that happens, we now have so much stress and inflammation that's impacting our body that we become symptomatic. A good example of this might be someone who a few years ago worked in a very fast-paced, high-stress job, and they loved it. It made them feel energized. It made them feel alive. But as the years went on, they realized that some of that stress didn't make them feel good. And in fact, It made them feel worse. And some of the tasks that they used to be able to accomplish within a day now are taking them days or weeks. And this is all because their bucket is now more full. And for people with Hashimoto's, usually it's because that disease is progressing. That limits our capacity for healing, limits our capacity for recovery, and limits our capacity to tolerate stress. So if we're always right on the cusp of being pushed to the edge, it's not always good to add additional stressors, even if we have the best intentions in mind. And this is the same reason that for some of my patients, I actually have them stop exercising completely, at least for a short period of time, until we can get some of their symptoms under control. Is exercise good for us? Of course it is. But it's not doing us any favors if we don't have the capacity to tolerate it. And we need to use the same mindset when it comes to fasting. So if you're someone who knows that you're extremely sensitive to stress, if you become headachy or fatigued as the day goes on, you feel worse if you skip meals, you have cravings for starch, salt, or sweets, especially when you're stressed out, and your function becomes severely limited when you don't get a good night of sleep, then fasting might not be the best option for you at this time. And although each person is going to be different, the quick and easy way that I like to use to get a general idea of whether or not someone should utilize fasting is I ask them how they felt about their fast before their blood draw. The people where it's really easy to jump into fasting, they're the ones they're looking forward to the blood draw. They're like, oh yeah, I stopped food for 12 hours. I felt really great. And I'm always like, oh, interesting. Tell me more about that. And the people who aren't in a good position to start aggressively fasting are the ones who hate their blood draws. I'll remind them that their re-eval is coming up and they'll say, oh yeah, do I have to fast for this one? Yes. And again, they're never looking forward to it because it's such a struggle and it doesn't make them feel very good. So my recommendation for someone whose bucket is already all the way filled up and their tolerance for stress is low, but they still want to implement some of these fasting strategies, is to start off simple, easy, and with something that your body can accomplish. The best way to do this is by, at a minimum, fasting for 12 hours per day. That means if you start eating at 7 a.m., well, then you're done eating at 7 p.m. And although that can be a pretty big change for some people, even in the most stressful situations, fasting for a minimum of 12 hours is something that can be beneficial and can be tolerated. While you're working on your 12-hour fast, utilize other strategies to make sure that you're building your body back up. Have consistent meal timing. Eat nutrient-dense whole foods. And find healthy ways to offload some of that stress. Once your body starts to repair and become more stable, then at that time, we can assess your fasting strategy and determine whether or not we want to make some changes. Now, real quickly, I did want to note that some of my patients in the past are very type A, and they're so focused on achieving a certain outcome that they're willing to do whatever they have to do to get to that point. Now, in some cases, this idea of pushing through the initial discomfort of fasting, it has worked. I have seen people do it, but I've also seen it blow up spectacularly. So if you're someone who's watching this video and you're saying, you know, Dr. Brad, fasting was really hard for me in the beginning, but I pushed through it, and on the other side, I experienced a lot of benefits, that's awesome. I'm so happy for you. I want you to have those positive outcomes, and I'm not trying to hold anyone back from that. However, I also want to make sure that we're being safe. So if you're someone who feels really strongly about fasting and is willing to give anything a try, then I support that. And there are case studies out there that show that that can be a successful avenue to follow. But if you're starting to fast and you're noticing more fatigue, more brain fog, hair loss, increased joint pain, and headaches, essentially, you're noticing a general increase in your symptoms, then it's probably time to reevaluate. Remember, more is not always better, and the most important feedback is the feedback that your body is giving you. But if we do think we're at a point in our life where we want to add fasting, then we want to do it in a way that allows us to achieve the most success. As I mentioned, it's my belief that most people are spending too much time eating throughout the day. And without providing our body with the necessary breaks from food, It can disrupt normal metabolism, immune, gut, and hormonal function. So here's how I break it down for my patients. It's good to combine shorter, intermittent fasts on a regular basis in conjunction with less frequent, longer fasts, as each has their own pros and cons. Just like my people who are super stressed, if you've never done any fasting before, a great place to start is by establishing that 12-hour eating window. Once we feel comfortable with that approach and we've implemented it into our lifestyle, then over the next few days, weeks, or months, we'll start to expand that fasting time and shorten that eating window to where most people are fasting somewhere between 13 and 16 hours per day. Now, typically speaking, that's a great place for people to stay for as long as they want. But even though most of us like having consistency and having some sort of routine, be aware that your fasting length doesn't have to be the same all the time. Back to the concept that fasting is somewhat stressful. If we have other stressors in our life, either good or bad, we may want to modify our fasting length to accommodate those other changes. So if your exercise demand increases, if you're having a really busy week at work, or if you're just not sleeping very well, then it might be a good idea to shorten your fasting duration. The next thing to be aware of is changes in how you respond to fasting during different phases in your menstrual cycle. Again, although these shorter 12 to 15 hour fasts are going to be tolerated in most situations, there are a couple times during the month when hormones are shifting and we really need to be careful about fasting for any longer than that. My big recommendation is that in the second half of the menstrual cycle, progesterone is the dominant hormone. And progesterone has some specific interactions with cortisol and other neurotransmitters that helps to stabilize blood sugar. Progesterone usually peaks at around 21 days, and after that point, it decreases until the period starts. As progesterone decreases, so does our general support for our blood sugar levels. And this is why it's not uncommon to notice an increase in sugar cravings, irritability, and problems with our sleep. But because our internal mechanisms at this time are no longer being as supportive of our fuel levels, then usually it's not helpful to add an external stress, which can also impact fuel stability. The other time period that I've seen some patients struggle with is around ovulation, which makes sense because this is another transition point for our hormones. During ovulation, the body is shifting from an estrogen dominant phase into that progesterone phase. And when our hormones are fluctuating or there's any sort of transition, then it's more likely to be stressful to the body. So be mindful that I do not recommend extended fasting in the last week of your menstrual cycle before bleeding starts or around ovulation. Now, the exact timing of that is of course going to vary from person to person, so you may want to track what your cycle looks like. But when it comes to those points, if you're intermittent fasting, shorten your fast duration and make sure to avoid those extended multi-day fasts. But speaking of which, what about those multi-day fasts? Longer duration fasts can be powerful, and they have been shown to reset our immune system, increase antioxidant production, increase the production of stem cells, significantly increase growth hormones like HGH and brain-derived neurotrophic factor, all while significantly increasing the production of ketones, which not only can our cells use as fuel, but also provides a generalized anti-inflammatory effect. So if you've heard about autophagy before, which is a massive cleanup on a cellular level, this is where that comes into play in a more significant manner. I like people to target a 2-day or 48-hour fast to start, see how they feel, and extend it to 72 hours if things are going well. During this time, it's recommended that you only consume water and add electrolytes as needed. I find that a lot of people do much better in terms of their hunger levels in the beginning if they're able to add some sodium, potassium, and potentially magnesium. Plus, if you're someone who's prone to cramping or finds that they get lightheaded when they go too long without food, then having some electrolytes can usually reduce these symptoms. Although these longer fasts can be powerful, I don't typically have people do them more than one time per month. Long fasts can have negative impacts on protein synthesis. And while that can be good when it comes to that cellular cleanup that we talked about, if we're also trying to heal and recover due to our thyroid changes, then inhibiting protein synthesis isn't something that we want to have happen on a regular basis. But just like we said with the shorter fasts, when you're doing these longer fasts, pay attention to how you feel, get feedback from your body, and adjust the time on whatever feels best to you. I think sometimes people get locked into a particular recommended duration because someone recommended it. And if they were having really great results, we wanted to have the same results too. So then we think, oh, if Dr. Brad said do 72 hours, if I only do 71, then it's not worth it. No, not the case. Is there a difference between a 72-hour fast and a 12-hour fast? Yes, there is. But there is no magic universal number for everyone. And as long as we have these general parameters in mind and we adapt them for our own body, that's when we're going to get the best results. So in summary, if you're going to utilize fasting, then I recommend using a 12 to 16-hour window of fasting on a regular basis and adjusting that based on demand, stress levels, and changes in hormones. In addition, using some 2 to 3 day fasts on a monthly basis can also be beneficial. But again, we'll want to time that with some of those lifestyle factors that we just mentioned. Using these different types of fasts in combination can be a powerful approach to improving your health. But in the end, make sure that you're listening to your body, you're seeing improvements rather than worsening of symptoms. And with Hashimoto's in general, we never want to force something if it's not the right fit. But I hope that you like this video on fasting. And if you have any questions or if you want to share the types of fasting approaches that have worked for you, let me know in the comments. If you like the information but know that you're someone who needs more support and you'd like to work with me one-on-one, either in person or virtually, then you can start that process by sending an email to contact@seattlethyroidhelp.com. Once we receive your information, my staff will reach out to you and make sure that you're a good fit for the free consultation. During the consultation, we'll go over your health concerns, your goals, and figure out if this is something I can help you with. If it is something that I feel is in my wheelhouse, then I'll explain to you what the plan will look like. That way you can feel comfortable with every single step along the way, and you know exactly how we're going to work to help you feel better. As a reminder, the consultation is absolutely no pressure, and I just want to make sure that all of your questions are answered and that you feel that you're in the right spot for you. If you'd rather work on some things at home, then there are options for you as well. I have 2 free downloads listed in the description box, or you can check out any of my other strategy videos on the channel. But that is all for now. I love you guys. I hope you're doing well. Thank you for all the support lately. It's been absolutely incredible, and I just hope that the information is continuing to serve you. If you liked the video, don't forget to like and subscribe. If you want more information, you can follow me on Instagram or Facebook. But my name is Dr. Bodle. I hope you guys have a great rest of your week, and I will see you in the next one.